progress and poverty. Book V, Chapter 2. Nope, 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 nope. We're almost to the remedy. Alright, we'll stop at the Black Death. Welcome to the Henry George Daily Devotional, episode 58, chapter 2. The persistence of poverty amid advancing wealth. I think I will start titling these more flavor, using flavor instead of just the numbers. Alright. We determined what causes depressions, which has continued since this time still, and it has continued to baffle all non-Georgist economists everywhere. Some claim to understand, but they are probably wrong. What does that little thing do? Link copy to clipboard. So I could paste these in the video. So in the description, that would take you straight to here, and you could read along easily. Interesting. I'm improving my methodology for the second read-through. Annual read-through. Alright. Henry George writes, "The great problem, of which these recurring seasons of industrial depression are but peculiar manifestations, is now, I think, fully solved." Bam. And the social phenomena which all over the civilized world appall the philanthropist and perplex the statesman, which hang with clouds the future of the most advanced races, and suggests doubts of the reality and ultimate goal of what we have fondly called progress, are now explained. Oh, he puts his explanation in italics. The reason why, in spite of the increase of productive power, wages constantly tend to a minimum which will give but a bare living, is that with increase in productive power, rent tends to even greater increase, thus producing a constant tendency to the forcing down of wages. Yeah. Rent, once again, in this context, is what you have to pay to access land. George continues, "In every direction, the direct tendency of advancing civilization is to increase the power of human labor to satisfy human desires, to extirpate poverty and to banish want and the fear of want. All the things in which progress consists, all the conditions which progressive communities are striving for, have for their direct and natural result the improvement of the material, and consequently the intellectual and moral, more on that later, condition of all within their influence." Let me go through that sentence again. All the things which progress consists, all the conditions which progressive communities are striving for, have their direct and natural result, have for their direct and natural result the improvement of the material condition of all within their influence. The growth of population, the increase and extension of exchanges, the discoveries of science, the march of invention, the spread of education, the improvement of government, and the amelioration of manners, considered as material forces, have all a direct tendency to increase the productive power of labor. Not of some labor, but of all labor. Remember this connection: when you invent one labor-saving device through trade and exchange, that allows other people to create more of the other kinds of wealth, just whatever the society needs. Like if you had 100 people in your town and all 100 had to work to make food every day to feed themselves, and then you invent something, a magic shovel, whatever, and now only one person can work all day and they can feed all 100. That means 99 other people, they're not put out of work. They can start making video games. They can start making books. They can start making, uh, cars or shoes. Because I guess everyone was naked in this society. It was 100 naked people just eating every day. So the labor-saving invention of the magic shovel, which I shouldn't call it a magic shovel, we'll just call it like the backhoe. The invention of the backhoe. Uh, if society wants a whole ton more food, sure, they can do that. But if society doesn't really want more food, they had enough food, they can just redirect that now extra labor towards the things they do want. So in that way, improving the ability in one industry to make more lets you redirect labor, and so society just gets more of whatever it wants, of whatever it is capable of producing. It can just make more of that. Text messages. And then the other mention that I thought was interesting is here. My mom would be happy to hear that the amelioration of manners improves how well a society does. I guess I can grant that. No, certainly manners and protocol like that smooths trade and makes communication easier and clearer. I believe that's the real practical explanation. You could even go further and say like, oh, makes people happier, in which case, I don't know, whatever. Okay. Not of some, but of all labor. Not in some departments of industry, but in all departments of industry. For the law of the production of wealth in society is the law of each for all and all for each. But labor cannot reap the benefits which advancing civilization thus brings, because they are intercepted. Land being necessary to labor, and being reduced to private ownership, every increase in the productive power of labor but increases rent, the price that labor must pay for the opportunity to utilize its power, and thus all the advantages gained by the march of progress go to the owners of land. And wages do not increase, wages cannot increase, for the greater the earnings of labor, the greater the price that labor must pay out of its earnings for the opportunity to make any earnings at all. Yes, if that 100-person society had one landlord, well, he's gonna get rich off the backhoe and nobody else. The mere laborer has thus no more interest in the general advance of productive power than the Cuban slave has in the price of sugar. Yeah, the Cuban slave doesn't care if the price of sugar goes up, but the Cuban slave owner does. And just as an advance in the price of sugar may make the condition of the slave worse by inducing the master to drive him harder, so may the condition of the free laborer be positively as well as relatively changed for the worse by the increase in the productive power of his labor. For begotten of the continuous advance of rents, arises a speculative tendency which discounts the effect of future improvements by a still further advance of rents, and thus tends, where this has not occurred from the normal advance of rent, to drive down wages to the slave point, the point at which the laborer can just live. And thus, robbed of all the benefits of the increase in productive power, labor is exposed to certain effects of advancing civilization which, without the advantages that naturally accompany them, are positive evils, and of themselves tend to reduce the free laborer to the helpless and degraded condition of the slave. For all improvements which add to productive power as civilization advances consists in or necessitate a still further subdivision of labor, and the efficiency of the whole body of laborers is increased at the expense of the independence of the constituents. I got distracted during that sentence. For all improvements which add to productive power of civilization advances consist in or necessitate, okay, a further subdivision of labor, and the efficiency of the whole body of laborers is increased at the expense of the independence of the constituents. I see. Yes. As labor becomes specialized, we're no longer general, jack of all trades. We become masters of one. And we become more dependent upon each other. And this is why when one form of production is curtailed, checked, as Henry George was saying, because of this heavy interdependence and interlocking, that's why we have a whole industry-wide paroxysm. The individual laborer acquires knowledge of and skill in but an infinitesimal part of the varied processes which are required to supply even the commonest wants. The aggregate produce of the labor of a savage tribe is small, but each member is capable of an independent life. He can build his own habitation, hew out or stitch together his own canoe, make his own clothing, manufacture his own weapons, snares, tools, and ornaments. He has all the knowledge of nature possessed by his tribe, knows what vegetable productions are fit for food, and where they may be found, knows the habits and resorts of beasts, birds, fishes, and insects, can pilot himself by the sun or the stars, by the turning of blossoms or the mosses on the trees, is, in short, capable of supplying all his wants. He may be cut off from his fellows and still live, and thus possess an independent power, which makes him a free contracting party in his relations to the community of which he is a member. You cut me off from society, I'd die. But if you cut me off from society and you somehow manage to get me YouTube, I think I'd have a chance. Maybe I would need the internet with it. Well, clearly I need the internet to access YouTube. But maybe just videos enough. Because there's all those, survivalist channels now. I didn't say I would thrive. I didn't say I was likely to survive. I just said I'd have a chance. Compare this, and you would too. Compare with this savage the laborer in the lowest ranks of civilized society, whose life is spent in producing but one thing, or oftener but the infinitesimal part of one thing, out of the multiplicity of things that constitute the wealth of society, and go to supply even the most primitive wants, who not only cannot make even the tools required for his work, but often works with tools that he does not own and can never hope to own. Compelled to even closer and more continuous labor than the savage, and gaining by it no more than the savage gets, the mere necessaries of life, he loses the independence of the savage. He is not only unable to apply his own powers to the direct satisfaction of his own wants, but, without the concurrence of many others, he is unable to apply them indirectly to the satisfaction of his wants. He is a mere link in an enormous chain of producers and consumers, helpless to separate himself, and helpless to move except as they move. The worse his position in society, the more dependent he is on society, the more utterly unable does he become to do anything for himself. The very power of exerting his labor for the satisfaction of his wants passes from his own control, and may be taken away or restored by the actions of others, or by general causes over which he has no more influence than he has over the motions of the solar system. Excuse me. The primeval curse comes to be looked upon as a boon, and men think and talk and clamor and legislate as though monotonous manual labor in itself were a good and not an evil, an end and not a means. Under such circumstances, the man loses the essential quality of manhood, the godlike power of modifying and controlling conditions. He becomes a slave, a machine, a commodity, a thing, in some respects lower than the animal. That hits you hard. Tablecat asks, are jungles taxable lands? Certainly. If they might have a zero land value tax, but if a bunch of people want to go live in a jungle and there's not enough jungle for all of them, and they have to start sharing, there's some really good jungle, and a bunch of people want to go to that one jungle spot, then that society should agree to share that jungle spot by making the person who gets the good jungle compensate everyone who doesn't get the good jungle. But I suspect right now, well, actually, I suspect there are forces who want to claim jungle land, and then we have conservation acts preventing them. Will the jungle have variance in land value like urban areas have slums? Yeah, just like any natural land, there at the early development of society, I would say what's probably, if we look at like what's probably going to be valuable first would be land near water, and then moving away from the proximity of water would be the gradient descent, I suppose. And then I don't know what exactly they're harvesting for food, but good hunting lands are good berry picking lands. Yeah, I don't know. Well, that's true. California is land near water, so I guess then you would have to distinguish between, potable water or just transportational water. And depends if your society has developed agriculture or not. Anyway, back to George. I am no sentimental admirer of the savage state. I do not get my ideas of the untutored children of nature from Rousseau or Chateaubriand or Cooper. I am conscious of its material and mental poverty and its low and narrow range. I believe that civilization is not only the natural destiny of man, but the enfranchisement and elevation and refinement of all his powers, and think that it is only in such moods as may lead him to envy the cud-chewing cattle that a man who is free to the advantages of civilization could look with regret upon the savage state. But nevertheless, I think no one who will open his eyes to the facts can resist the conclusion that there are in the heart of our civilization large classes with whom the veriest savage could not afford to exchange. It is my deliberate opinion that if, standing on the threshold of being, one were given the choice of entering life as a Tierra del Fuegan, a black fellow of Australia, an Eskimo in the Arctic Circle, or among the lowest classes in such a highly civilized country as Great Britain, he would make infinitely the better choice in selecting the lot of the savage. For those classes who, in the midst of wealth, are condemned to want, suffer all the privations of the savage without his sense of personal freedom. They are condemned to more than his narrowness and littleness, without opportunity for the growth of his rude virtues. If their horizon is wider, it is but to reveal blessings that they cannot enjoy. That is heavy shit. There are some to whom this may seem like exaggeration, but it is only because they have never suffered themselves to realize the true condition of those classes upon whom the iron heel of modern civilization presses with full force. Just this morning, I have a friend who needed to borrow my car because he's trying to help his sister move out of Compton. Compton is like 4 miles away, 5 miles away. I live in a McMansion with a perfectly groomed front and backyard and a pool. 5 miles away is Compton, where there are hookers on her street. My friend's sister, and she's dating a guy from there, I guess, who's on parole, and then he like got scared that, I don't know, there's other things happening. Uh, like I could go walk there in an hour, right? Of course, I could drive. I could drive there in 5-10 minutes. In this highly civil, and yeah, those people right over there would be better off as fucking savages. Yeah. As de Tocqueville observed in one of his letters to Mademoiselle Swetchine, we so soon become used to the thought of want. I was just trying to look up a de Tocqueville quote yesterday, or maybe last week. I'm confused. And ChatGPT said it exists, but it couldn't find. ChatGPT, man. We so soon become used to the thought of want that we do not feel that an evil which grows greater to the sufferer the longer it lasts, becomes less to the observer by the very fact of its duration. And perhaps the best proof of the justice of this observation is that in cities where there exists a pauper class and a criminal class, where young girls shiver as they sew for bread, and tattered and barefooted children make a home in the streets, money is regularly raised to send missionaries to the heathen. Send missionaries to the heathen! It would be laughable if it were not so sad. Baal no longer stretches forth his hideous sloping arms, but in Christian lands mothers slay their infants for a burial fee. And I challenge the production from any authentic accounts of savage life of such descriptions of degradation as are to be found in official documents of highly civilized countries. In reports of sanitary commissioners and of inquiries into the condition of the laboring poor. Yeah, I mean, we whine and complain, or we like criticize, human sacrifice. But I don't know much about that. But I'm pretty sure the person who was sacrificed, while it is absolutely tragic and backwards that they were sacrificed, they probably lived a better life and were treated better up until the point of sacrifice than we do any of the people over in Skid Row. Skid Row is like 15 miles away, 20 miles away from me. A quick 2-hour run. Oh, man. George continues, the simple theory which I have outlined, if indeed it can be called a theory which is but the recognition of the most obvious relations, explains this conjunction of poverty with wealth, of low wages with high productive power, of degradation amid enlightenment, of virtual slavery in political liberty. It harmonizes as results flowing from a general and inexorable law. It's a typo. Capitalizing in. It harmonizes as results flowing from a general and inexorable law, facts otherwise most perplexing, and exhibits the sequence and relation between phenomena that without reference to it are diverse and contradictory. It explains why interests and wages are higher in new than in older communities, though the average as well as the aggregate of production of wealth is less. It explains why improvements which increase the productive power of labor and capital increase the reward of neither. Yeah, this time around I'm not going to forget the Transcontinental Railroad example. It explains what is commonly called the conflict between labor and capital, while proving the real harmony of interest between them. It cuts the last inch of ground from under the fallacies of protection, while showing why free trade fails to benefit permanently the working class. It explains why want increases with abundance and wealth tends to greater and greater aggregations. Excuse me. It explains the periodically recurring depressions of industry without recourse either to the absurdity of overproduction or the absurdity of overconsumption. It explains the enforced idleness of large numbers of would-be producers, which wastes the productive force of advanced communities, without the absurd assumption that there is too little work to do or that there are too many to do it. It explains the ill effects upon the laboring classes which often follow the introduction of machinery, without denying the natural advantages which the use of machinery gives. It explains the vice and misery which show themselves amid dense population, without attributing to the laws of the all-wise and all-beneficent defects which belong only to the short-sighted and selfish enactments of men. This explanation is in accordance with all the facts. Look over the world today. In countries, my only slight critique, which he even addresses later, and I think it was just less significant in his time, would be patents and other false monopolies. And of course, he's writing 1879. This was like prior to I guess, like, I don't know, the first like actual socialist state that was centralized planning. But that would sort of still be yeah, that would be a forcible taking of the land and not letting the land be free for humans to do with what they please. Look over the world today in countries the most widely differing, under conditions the most diverse as to government, as to industries, as to tariffs, as to currency. You will find distress among the working classes, but everywhere that you thus find distress and destitution in the midst of wealth, you will find that the land is monopolized, that instead of being treated as the common property of the whole people, it is treated as the private property of individuals. I take back my comment about how significant patents and things like it are. I just wanted to be different. I just wanted to not say that George has got it all perfectly right, but he kind of does. I don't know. You will find that the land is monopolized, that instead of being treated as the common property of the whole people, it is treated as the private property of individuals, that for its use by labor, large revenues are extorted from the earnings of labor. Look over the world today, comparing different countries with each other, and you will see that it is not the abundance of capital or the productiveness of labor that makes wages high or low, but the extent to which the monopolizers of land can, in rent, levy tribute upon the earnings of labor. Is it not a notorious fact, known to the most ignorant, that new countries, where the aggregate wealth is small but where land is cheap, are always better countries for the laboring classes than the rich countries where land is dear? I'm now thinking about, all this. There's a lot of talk of immigration in the USA right now. Do we still consider the USA new? I guess I don't really know much about. I don't really know much about the economic situation in Mexico, I guess, other than like dominated by the cartels, and it's just a violent state, I guess. I don't know. I also hear that Mexico has done a lot better in the last 10 years or something, but I don't know. I don't know any of their policy decisions really. Wherever you find land relatively low, will you not find wages relatively high? And wherever land is high, will you not find wages low? As land increases in value, poverty deepens and pauperism appears. In the new settlements where land is cheap, you will find no beggars, and the inequalities in condition are very slight. In the great cities where land is so valuable that it is measured by the foot, you will find the extremes of poverty and of luxury. And this disparity in condition between the two extremes of the social scale may always be measured by the price of land. Land in New York is more valuable than San Francisco, and in New York the San Franciscan may see squalor and misery that will make him stand aghast. Land is more valuable in London than in New York, and in London there is squalor and destitution worse than that of New York. Compare the same country in different times, and the same relation is obvious. As the result of much investigation, Hallam says he is convinced that the wages of manual labor were greater in amount in England during the Middle Ages than they are now. Whether this is so or not, it is evident that they could not have been much, if any, less. The enormous increase in the efficiency of labor, which even in agriculture is estimated at 700 or 800%, and in many branches of industry is almost incalculable, has only added to rent. The rent of agricultural land in England is now, according to Professor Rogers, 120 times as great, measured in money, as it was 500 years ago, and 14 times as great, measured in wheat, while in the rent of building land and mineral land the advance has been enormously greater. According to the estimate of Professor Fawcett, the capitalized rental value of the land of England now amounts to 4.5 billion, or that's 4.5 billion pounds, and I guess this is the dollar sign again. 21 trillion 870 no 21 billion 870 million dollars. This is the dollar sign again. That is to say, oh hello, John. Hello, so unnecessary. Um, Welcome. We've just been talking about how we've been talking about the sad fact that the lowest of our modern day wage earners would genuinely be better. I don't like to stay in the conclude. You guys should have been here earlier. Well, you can watch the VOD. Uh, Yeah, I mean the simple fact is he's going through this bit here talking about how the greatest poverty is seen in in the areas of greatest progress. There in his time, he is saying, uh, where is this San Francisco bit? Yeah. Um, the land in New York is more valuable than San Francisco, and in New York, the San Franciscan may see squalor and misery that will make him stand aghast. Land is more valuable in London than in New York, and in London there is squalor and destitution worse than that of New York. He's writing in 1879, so San Francisco had not developed that much. Anyway, we were over here. Um, so the land value of England is now 4.5 billion pounds, or 21 billion dollars. That should be a dollar sign. That is to say, a few thousand of the people of England hold a lien upon the labor of the rest, the capitalized value of which is more than twice as great as, at the average price of Southern Negroes in 1860, would be the value of her whole population were they slaves. In Belgium and Flanders, in France and Germany, the rent and selling price of agricultural land have doubled within the last 30 years. Footnote. Citizens of Land Tenure, published by the Cobden Club. In short, increased power of production has everywhere added to the value of land. Nowhere has it added to the value of labor, for though actual wages may in some places have somewhat risen, the rise is clearly attributable to other causes. In more places they have fallen. That is, where it has been possible for them to fall, for there is a minimum below which laborers cannot keep up their numbers, and everywhere wages as a proportion of the produce have decreased. And that is where I was going to stop today. Um, cool. I'm going to stop the recording for Henry George Day devotional. All right, let us pray. See. Oh. Chapter 2. We've read this is what we were reading today, the persistence, poverty, amid, advancing, wealth. Well, we definitely have London greater than New York, greater than San Francisco, translates to and land values in, therefore poverty is highest in London and less in NY and less in SF. Um, the savage, well, I guess we should just start at the top. We've established that, we'll put this here when he does his italics. What, where did it, oh, because I popped it out. We need the Arial again. Labor can't reap the benefit. evils ensue. In advanced civilizations, a laborer knows only a small specialized skill. He is wholly dependent on civilization for all his other wants. In primitive culture, each member has a wide range of knowledge. George doesn't put savagery on a pedestal. It's the destiny of man to improve material and mental in multiform ways. Yet, who wouldn't prefer the savage to being the lowest wage earner of London? I'm no sentimental, I cannot guess. Material and mental ways. As de Tocqueville says, we get used to seeing poverty. We get numb seeing poverty. It is egregious that we send money to save the heathen when children die in our streets. Around this time is when I mentioned my friend just this morning borrowed my car so he could go help his sister move out of Compton. Compton is about 5 miles away. She lives in a bad situation. It's Compton. There's been physical violence and other things on her street. And I live 5 miles away in a 2-story, 5-bedroom sort of McMansion with my dad, with a pool and a housekeeper that comes every 2 weeks. And I will inherit this house. Land monopoly is the true explanation. How hilarious it is to consider the others. Over consumption, over abundance, or over production. Blaming it on labor saving inventions like machines. overpopulation. I don't know if he even says it here. Does he say that here? Why do I have my own enormously in England? Or Hallam says the medieval worker actually takes home more wealth for a day's labor. Wages tend to rate at which the worker can just live, can barely just, can literally survive at. As Belgium, Flanders, France, Germany have progressed, their land values have doubled in the last 30 years. Alright, that's all for my précis. Précis. Now, we will upload HGDD. I think this is a 57. Book 5, Chap 2. Start. Okay. So we're gonna go with this new HGDD 57, Book 5, Chap 2. I already want to look at my précis. Better to be a savage. Savage or slave labor? George discusses the nature. George says that land monopolists force wages to a bare minimum. This results in conditions for the lowest wage earners to be worse than a savage. Worse than a savage. We'll try it. HGG episode 57. Maybe this is how we do it. Yes, and then we could also link directly to no. Copy that link. I think I already, yeah, I guess I already had it here. I guess we'll leave it at the bottom. Okay. Upload a thumbnail. If I still have anybody left over from John's raid, if any of you game developers, that's also what I do. I'm not a professional Georgist, not yet. I am considering hosting or running a Georgist game jam. Monopoly being the first ever Georgist game as a kind of anti-game. Well, not anti. What am I saying? It's a demonstration of the ills of land monopoly. It is not the landlord's game demonstrates also the Georgist solution. And I think doing a George jam would be pretty fun because you could make all kinds of different demonstrations of Georgism or demonstrations of dark Georgism. We want to convert our MP4. Wait a minute. I was going to see if this would just take if you feed it an MP4, what happens? Well, we will see. This whole time I've been converting it. I should try reading the guidelines sometimes. Read the effing manual. I did say an F word. I guess I could say this is explicit content. 157. next? I should have been doing these titles from the get-go. And there was something I liked about the blandness and organization, but it's okay. All right. Hmm. In a few minutes, it will be available there. I mean, the episode number lets you sort of keep track, I guess. But it does make it a little bit hard to know where you are. I don't know. Alright. Do I? Episode 69 is an eventuality indeed. Oh, when I was young and that number meant nothing, it was a better life. I don't want email notifications based on uploading. Settings. Settings. Is there like a preferences? Account settings? Don't look. Settings. Stop Spotify from emailing me when I upload podcast episodes. Availability about I feel like it should have been in the account settings. They don't email me much, to be honest, but you're receiving this email because you signed up for Spotify for podcasters. Oh, I know. Spotify for podcasters email settings.
Looking for help with updating your email address on Spotify? You're in the right place. On your browser, go to spotify.com/account and log in. Click on Edit Profile and go to the email section. Enter your new email address and confirm your password before clicking Save Profile.
That's not what I want.
Now you can get back to listening to all your.
Oh well. This does remind me to check comments. I don't know. I giveth up. Restream channels.